Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark, and in this lecture we are going to learn about present passive participles. And the good news about present passive participles is that they are the easiest participles to form and use, in part because they are used the least, except for a few set words that are used very often, which you can just memorize and treat as regular adjectives. In fact, some of them you already know. So with that happy thought, let's jump into present passive participles. Before we talk about present passive participles, let's talk about passive participles in general. So, passive participles describe the recipient of the action. Remember that active participles describe the doer of the action, whereas passive participles describe the recipient of the action, the object of the verb. And because of that, passive participles can only be formed from transitive verbs, so verbs that take a direct object. Remember that passive participles refer to the recipient of the action, so they refer to the object of the verb, not the subject of the verb. And if we have a passive participle in a clause, the actual subject of the verb will be in the instrumental, and we'll see some examples of this later in the lecture. Meanwhile, if we turn a participial clause with a passive participle into a catori clause, catori will be in the accusative. So if we have an active participle and we turn it into a catori clause, catori will be in the nominative. If we have a passive participle and we turn it into a catori clause, catori will be in the accusative. So how do we form present passive participles? It's actually really straightforward. First, we find the me form of an imperfective transitive verb. So present passive participles can only be formed from imperfective transitive verbs. Imperfective because they're present, and transitive because they're passive. So for example, we can take uważać, to respect, and we turn it into uważajem. Lubić, to like or love, and we turn it into lubim. And then we just add regular hard stem adjectival endings. For example, uważajem becomes uważajemy. Lubim becomes lubimi, which you probably already know. And note the stress. So it is the same as the infinitive in shifting stress second conjugation verbs. Just like with active participles, with passive participles, the stress is going to shift back to wherever it is in the infinitive in these second conjugation shifting stressed verbs. For example, mój lubim becomes lubimy, obchodzim becomes nieobchodzimy. And when do we use present passive participles? They are often used as adjectives, and that's why you probably already know words like lubimy, favorite or beloved, or uważajemy, which literally means respected, but is often used to mean dear at the beginning of a letter. For example, if you were writing a formal letter, you would begin it with uważajemy, so on and so forth. And they are also often used with the prefix nie to mean unsomethingable. So for example, niezabywajemy is unforgettable. Niesklaniajemy is indeclinable. Nieulawimy is elusive or uncatchable. And note that nieulawimy is actually formed from a perfective verb, ulawić, but we use the same formation that we would use for a present passive participle, and it has the same meaning. Nieulawimy is elusive or uncatchable. Nieczytajemy is unreadable, like this book is completely unreadable. And niewmieniajemy is legally insane, or someone who is literally not chargeable or not blamable. So this is often the meaning of these present passive participles with the prefix nie, unsomethingable. Let's finish up with some examples. We can say, Преподаватель уважаемый всеми студентами. The college instructor respected by all the students. And that is the same as уважаемый всеми студентами преподаватель. Note that we can do the same thing with these passive participles that we were doing with the active participles, where we can either have the noun followed by a comma and then the participle, or we put the participle before the noun and there's no comma, And anything that goes with the participle goes between it and the noun. So we have преподаватель, уважаемый всеми студентами. The instructor respected by all the students. And so we have преподаватель, comma, уважаемый. Or уважаемый всеми студентами преподаватель means the same thing. The instructor respected by all the students, or literally the respected by all the students instructor. And we have уважаемый and then всеми студентами, so whatever goes with it, and then преподаватель. And both of those mean the same thing as преподаватель, которого уважают все студенты. And note that in this instance, in this last example with который is in the accusative. Преподаватель, которого уважают все студенты. Or for another example, we could have актер, любимый всей публикой, an actor beloved by the whole public or all the audience. And that would be the same as любимый всей публикой актер. That would also mean an actor who is loved or beloved or favored by the whole audience or all the public. And that is the same again as актер, которого любит вся публика. And note again that we have in the first version of it, the noun актер followed by a comma, and then the participle, актер, любимый всей публикой. And then in the second example of this same sort of basic meaning, we have the participle and then whatever goes with it, and then the noun, and there's no comma separating them. Любимый всей публикой актер. And then in the third version, we have актер, которого любит вся публика, and который is once again in the accusative case. So I hope you found that helpful and not too confusing. Once again, the best way to learn participles is to do lots of reading. There is plenty of good reading in the textbook, so I recommend going through the readings that they offer in this chapter. And they give you a lot of really good examples of participles being used in written Russian. So that is a great place to start, and hopefully it will start to make sense to you, and you will be ready for the really difficult bit, which is past passive participles, which is what we will do next. So look forward to that, and we will talk about it soon.